round 3, first we are going to perform a single crochet stitch, abbreviated as SC, which will create 1 V, followed by an increase stitch, abbreviated as INC, which will create 2 V's. And this makes up one sequence, so one sequence has 3 V shapes. We will need to repeat this sequence total of 6 times, which means that we should end up with 18 stitches for round 3. Our first single crochet stitch will go into the stitch marked by the stitch marker. When we first began learning how to crochet, I suggested leaving the stitch marker in place. However, I would recommend removing the stitch marker first before inserting your hook to avoid accidentally stretching the yarn too much. Begin by carefully identifying the horizontal V that the orange stitch marker currently sits under. Then remove the stitch marker. Then insert your hook under that V. Now make your single crochet stitch following this video. Since this was the very first stitch of your new round, it's essential to immediately place the stitch marker under that V that we have just created. Now let's pull the hook away from the piece to create a larger hoop. Turn your work to view the edge and identify the V the loop traces back into. This is our first stitch, and therefore we will mark it with our stitch marker. Now let's move forward with our pattern. Next, we are going to make an increase stitch, abbreviated as INC. To figure out where to place your hook next, examine the yarn wrapped around your hook. It passes through 2 loops, and the first loop leads back to a particular hole. You should insert your hook into the hole immediately next to it. But not just any hole, but underneath that horizontal V. Now we will proceed with increase stitch, which involves performing 2 single crochet stitches in the same hole. So make your first single crochet stitch. You are now halfway through the increase stitch. Now it's time to create the second single crochet stitch, forming the second half of the increase stitch. Insert your hook into the very same hole as the one you just worked on. Observe the yarn wrapped around your hook passing through 2 loops. The first loop traces back to a specific hole. Now insert your hook into that hole and make your second single crochet stitch into it, turning the single crochet stitch that we made into an increase stitch. After you're done, now that we have created 1 single crochet stitch and 1 increase stitch, that makes our first sequence. So in each sequence, we'll crochet 1 single crochet stitch and 1 increase stitch. And you need to do this sequence a total of 6 times. As we have already created our first sequence together, I think it's time for you to build your confidence in determining where to place your crochet hook next. So I will let you create your next stitches by yourself until we finish our round. When you are done with your round 3, you should have a piece that resembles something like I have. You should also have a total of 18 V's all around. Make sure to count them to make sure you have the correct amount of V's. And keep in mind that the loop on your hook does not count as a stitch. If you have 18 stitches, that means that we have successfully completed our third round and we can move forward to round 4.